have stolen it. Sano driving them forward. Still Sano! Kaishu Sano with his first international goal.
Some football defeats feel like the end of a journey. Others reveal the beginning of something much bigger. When the final whistle blew against Brazil, the headlines were predictable. Brazil had survived. Japan were out. To millions watching around the world, it was simply another World Cup result. Another reminder that football's traditional powers always find a way when the pressure reaches its highest point. But if that is all you saw, then you missed the real story. This was never just a documentary about Brazil winning another knockout match. It was about Japan showing the football world how close they have come to joining the sport's elite.
Knows himself, and that will do it for Japan.
Japan's rise was never built on one extraordinary generation or one unforgettable tournament. It was the result of decades of planning, investment, and an unwavering commitment to long-term development.
Nakamura cross, and Kaoru Mitoma scores for Japan. Links up well with Daichi Kamada, and there is the breakthrough for Japan. Kamada cutting through the defence.
While many nations relied on individual stars to transform their fortunes, Japan focused on building a football culture. Youth academies were modernized, coaching standards improved, and talented young players were encouraged to test themselves in Europe's most demanding leagues. Year after year, that vision produced footballers who were technically gifted, tactically intelligent, and mentally prepared for the biggest stages. Their ambition was never simply to qualify for the FIFA World Cup. It was to become a nation capable of competing with anyone. For years, however, the football world viewed Japan through the same lens. They were respected for their discipline and organization, but rarely considered serious contenders against the game's traditional powers. Every World Cup seemed to follow the same narrative. Japan would impress, earn admiration, and eventually fall to a nation with greater experience. That perception lasted until Japan stopped asking for respect and started taking it. Victories over former world champions forced football to look at them differently. Germany discovered Japan's relentless intensity. Spain discovered their tactical intelligence and composure under pressure. Those victories were not fortunate moments. They were the reward for years of careful planning and continuous improvement. Japan were no longer recognized as Asia's strongest team alone. They had become one of the most respected national sides in international football. Yet respect alone has never won a World Cup. As tournaments progress, the margins become smaller and every decision carries greater significance. The teams that lift football's greatest trophy are often the ones that remain calm when everything is on the line. Japan understood that better than anyone. Every tournament had made them stronger. Every disappointment had exposed another area for growth. Rather than accepting their limitations, they refined their style, strengthened their mentality, and continued producing players capable of thriving at Europe's highest level. By the time the 2026 FIFA World Cup arrived, Japan were no longer traveling to compete. They arrived believing they belonged among the world's best. That is why the match against Brazil carried so much significance. It was never simply another knockout game. It was the ultimate measuring stick. 90 minutes against the most successful nation in World Cup history would reveal whether Japan had truly reached the level they had spent decades pursuing, or whether one final step still separated them from football's greatest prize. The answer began to unfold the moment Japan stepped onto the pitch. Everything they had spent decades building was about to face its greatest examination. Standing across from them was Brazil, the most successful nation in FIFA World Cup history. A team whose identity has been shaped by winning football's biggest matches, producing legendary players, and embracing the pressure that comes with wearing one of the sport's most famous shirts. For many nations, facing Brazil is an occasion to remember. For Japan, it was an opportunity to measure just how far they had come. From the opening whistle, Japan played without hesitation. They pressed aggressively, circulated the ball with confidence, and refused to surrender possession simply because of the opponent standing in front of them. For long periods, this was not the one-sided contest many had predicted. Japan matched Brazil's intensity, challenged them tactically, and demonstrated the technical quality that has become the foundation of their modern identity. It was another reminder that Japanese football no longer belongs in conversations about potential. It belongs in conversations about genuine quality. Brazil were not facing an underdog hoping to survive. They were facing a team determined to compete on equal terms. Yet football's biggest tournaments are rarely decided by possession, passing accuracy, or promising performances. They are decided by moments. The world's greatest teams understand exactly when those moments arrive, and more importantly, they know how to take advantage of them. That is where Brazil reminded everyone why they remain one of football's most successful nations. A single lapse in concentration, one decisive action, and one clinical finish changed the direction of the match. It was not a difference in talent that separated the two sides. It was the experience of recognizing the defining moment before it disappeared. That is what made this defeat so significant. Japan did not lose because they lacked quality. They did not lose because they were overwhelmed or outclassed. In many phases of the match, they looked every bit as organized, composed, and technically accomplished as their opponents. What separated them from victory was the ruthless efficiency that has defined every great World Cup champion. The ability to remain calm when everything is at stake, to make the right decision under immense pressure, and to turn one opportunity into the moment that decides an entire tournament. For some, the final whistle confirmed that Brazil were simply the stronger team. But for those willing to look beyond the scoreboard, it revealed something far more important. Japan had reached the point where they no longer needed to prove they could compete with football's elite. They had already done that. The challenge now was learning how to transform performances like this into victories. It is the smallest step in theory, yet often the hardest in football. And as painful as this defeat was, it may also have been the lesson Japan needed most. Because every great football nation reaches a moment when competing is no longer enough. The next challenge is learning how to win. And that is exactly where Japan's story continues. Every great football nation has experienced a night like this, a defeat that felt painful in the moment, but later became the foundation of something extraordinary. Brazil endured years of disappointment before becoming world champions. Spain suffered heartbreaking eliminations before building one of the greatest international teams football has ever seen. Argentina waited decades before Lionel Messi finally completed his story in Qatar. Football history is filled with champions whose greatest victories were built on lessons learned in defeat. That is why Japan's loss to Brazil should not be remembered as the end of a dream. It should be remembered as another chapter in a journey that has been unfolding for decades. Perhaps that is what makes Japan's rise so remarkable. Unlike many football nations, their success has never depended on one extraordinary generation. Every World Cup has left them stronger than the last. Better academies have produced better players. Better players have raised the level of the national team. More footballers now compete in Europe's biggest leagues, gaining the experience that once separated Japan from the world's elite. The gap that seemed impossible to close 20 years ago has become remarkably small, not because Japan found a shortcut, but because they refused to stop improving. Every setback became another lesson. Every disappointment became another reason to come back stronger. Against Brazil, Japan discovered that the final step separating contenders from champions is measured in moments, not miles. They proved they possessed the technical quality, tactical discipline, and confidence to compete with one of the greatest football nations in history. What they lacked was not talent. It was the ruthless efficiency that defines champions. The ability to recognize one decisive moment, seize it without hesitation, and never allow it to slip away. That lesson cannot be learned in training sessions or friendly matches. It is earned through nights exactly like this, when the smallest decision can shape an entire nation's future. That is why the football world should pay close attention to what comes next. It is easy to celebrate the winners and overlook the teams that fall just short. History has made that mistake many times before, but sometimes the team walking away in defeat is quietly preparing to become tomorrow's champion. Japan no longer need to prove they belong among football's most respected nations. They have already earned that place. The challenge now is transforming respect into trophies, and if their journey over the last 2 decades has taught us anything, it is that Japan rarely stands still for long. For years, the football world asked when Japan would finally catch up with football's biggest nations. Perhaps that question no longer matters. Japan have already caught them. The real question is whether the biggest nations are ready for what Japan become next. Because some football defeats end a story. Others reveal the beginning of something much bigger. Perhaps that opening sentence was true after all. This was never the end of Japan's journey. It may well become the moment the football world looks back on and realizes that Japan were no longer chasing greatness. They were already running beside it.